Money should be seen as an energy flow, not as something that can be hoarded. For when money is treated as a material reality, it blocks one's creative flow. Money, like matter, is only frozen energy. Energy is what creates matter. It is energy that forever moves, changes, and dissolves matter. Matter, untouched by energy, is inert. If you need to increase your income, know that the energy you put out is more important than specific schemes for earning. Energy will attract opportunity. Recharge your energy from its cosmic source, and whatever income you need will ever be yours. And I should also mention that this applies to all kinds of income, not just money, but any gain of inspiration, inspiration, energy, understanding, whatever you might have. Let us affirm the treasure of the infinite is mine. For its wealth is energy. And I am energy. The treasury of the infinite is mine. For its wealth is energy. And I am energy. The treasury of the infinite is mine. For its wealth is energy. And I am energy. Let us pray, O mighty fountain of infinite light, from whose spray the countless galaxies are made. Let me wash away my worldly ambitions. In thy waters. Let me bathe in radiant eddies of thy energy. Thou art my wealth. Thou my treasure. Thou my security. Om. Peace. Amen. I'd like to read also from Paramhansa Yogananda's Whispers from Eternity. Bless me, my Father, so that I may fly with thee from peak to peak, or lie on the grass and sing thy song to the birds. Bless me that I may wade through human hearts to bring them the song of thy glory. Bless me that I may whirl around the starry rim and blaze thy name. With the nebulae I will spread thy holy name. Bless me that with the humming atoms I may time my song with thine. Our reading this morning from Rays of the One Light is on who is worthy of God's grace. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Matthew chapter 9, Jesus Christ says, "The harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into his harvest." Truth is susceptible of many interpretations, even as a cut diamond presents many facets. This passage is usually taken to refer to the need of the multitudes for conversion. There is, however, a more inward view of these words of Jesus. The harvest he refers to can only mean, in its deepest sense, the state of spiritual enlightenment. The laborers, then, are those few who are willing to seek enlightenment. But there is a further meaning here. Laborers can be taken also as a reference to our own thoughts, feelings, and aspirations, a few of which we may direct Godward, but with too many of which we still run after worldly fulfillments. On the one hand, we love God, but on the other hand, we worry over how the grocery bills will be paid. Paramhansa Yogananda, during a Christmas meditation, had a vision of the Divine Mother. The Master spoke to her directly, out loud, so that we might hear one side at least of this blissful communion. "Oh, you are so beautiful," he repeated over and over. "Don't go," he cried at last. "You say the material desires of these people are driving you away. Oh, come back. Please don't go." And so the disciples understood that God cannot come, or if he does come, he cannot stay, when his light is extinguished by gusts of mental restlessness. Pray that all your thoughts, feelings, and aspirations become laborers for God, directing all their energies toward reaping the inner divine harvest. To achieve this one-pointedness, be even-minded and even-handed toward all. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 9th chapter, "By this sign is he known, being of equal grace to comrades, friends, chance comers, strangers, lovers, enemies, aliens and kinsmen, loving all alike, evil or good. God alone," Sister Gyanamata used to say. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. This passage, as I mentioned in the reading itself, is often taken to mean the harvest of potential seekers of God. And the laborers are taken to mean the missionaries who would go out and convert them. There's a little mix-up in that metaphor. Whatever you harvest, you eat. This doesn't mean we're going to eat the people that we convert. The eating is done by the people who are converted. So the metaphor is not really perfect. But a very interesting and important point here is to be understood. He says, pray to God for laborers. In other words, we need to understand that the real power that converts anybody is not the individual minister, missionary, or person trying to persuade others. The conversion really comes from inside each person. It all becomes finally a matter between you and God. Nobody can do it for you. Master said, 1,000 Christs couldn't give you the desire for God, unless in their company something sparked within yourself. But it would have to come from inside. You, as Master said, have to individually make love to God. He said this in at Mount Washington, where we were living at the time, where I was living at the time, and he said, there are many rats and mice in the canyon on this property. They are not finding God. You have to make the effort. He said, lots of people come here and they just play the organ and listen to music and chat and so on, and they think, well, they're living a good life, therefore God will be pleased. Well, mind you, God's pleasure is not really the issue. God is always pleased. He's always blissful. He's not there keeping score on every individual. It's your karma that keeps score on yourself. What you have to do is individually understand that what you're seeking, the pleasure that you're seeking, is not that of somebody way up there in heaven, but of your own self. When you act right, you're pleased inside. You feel that smile of approval inwardly. It's not an easy thing to win, but once you have it, it's just there. Now we need to work for that kind of conversion. First of all, conversion of ourselves to truth. The path we follow is secondary to our love for God. As Master said to Dr. Lewis in Boston when he was leaving for the West Coast, and Dr. Lewis was feeling this was Master's first Kriya disciple in America, and Dr. Lewis was very unhappy at Master going. And Master said, "Never mind what happens to me, don't forget God." God is that truth within ourselves. That is what we really have to satisfy. And so if we seek, the real harvest, the harvest is God consciousness. It's plentiful, it's everywhere. Everybody could seek that. But let us pray to God to convert people's hearts to that understanding. They could be Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Jews, Christians. It doesn't matter. Individually, you are nothing. When you get to heaven, assuming you get there, I'm sure you'll all get there. God isn't going to say, "Did you go to church regularly?" God isn't going to say, "Were you a good Catholic or Jew or whatever?" He's only got one question to ask each one of us. Do you love me? And if so, how much? To love God completely, that was told us by Jesus in the Gospel, I think, of St. John, where he reminded us of an old passage from the ancient scriptures, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy strength, with all thy heart, with all thy mind, with all thy soul," your whole self. You know, it's sort of like threading a needle. You take that little tiny thread, and if it doesn't quite completely twirl to one point, don't think that by willpower you can jam it through. It doesn't work. All you do is squash the thread. You have to very sensitively bring it to a point, and then with great care bring the needle up to the thread and bring it through. The same thing with this spiritual eye. As long as your energy is going up toward the eye of that needle in the spiritual eye, but there's a little thought, as that example of Master's vision of Divine Mother during the Christmas meditation, a little thought that, yes, I love you, God, but I wonder what's for breakfast. He won't come. But that's a trivial thought. Much more important are these deeper desires that people have, that they come out suddenly in a person's life. You don't know your whole subconscious. It's a huge continent. And it's a long time before you can bring all that to focus on one city of God. And so, many times it happens that the devotee will be seeking God, and all of a sudden he'll have an opportunity to, let us say, become a scientist. Somebody says to him, "You could have been a great scientist," and he thinks, "Oh, wow, I could have." And suddenly he's off there in a laboratory doing all sorts of experiments and getting all keen on name and fame and getting his name in the who's who as a great scientist and so on. Usually it doesn't work. Usually, in fact, in every case I know of, such lives end up as failures because that's not what you're intended to do. You're intended to find God, and if you've once given yourself to Him, there's going to be something inside that will create a disharmony in you if you try in another direction. But I remember one time I asked Master, "Have I been your disciple for thousands of years?" He said, "It's been a long time, that's all I'll say." I said, "Does it always take so long?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Desires for this and that and the other thing take one away again and again." So remember that these little karmic bombs are always there. And little ones, it doesn't much matter. I remember I suddenly had a desire at Mount Washington many years ago to have different colored t-shirts. So I had different dyes and I put them all and dyed all these t-shirts. Beautiful blue, orange, red, green. It was great fun. I remember this fellow monk of mine sort of disapproving. I thought, for heaven's sake, why not have fun? Master didn't want us not to have fun. I asked him once to help me overcome the desire for food. He said, don't worry about those little things. When ecstasy comes, everything goes. So mind you, if you're too rigid, you become stale. As he said one time, The mind is like a donkey. You have to treat it that way. You beat it and it moves, and then suddenly it won't move. No matter how you beat it, it still keeps. Let it stand for a bit, then it will start moving again. So I don't mean to feel guilty if you suddenly decide to do some little thing. But mind you, there are some things that are traps. For example, somebody may have a great gift of acting, and he may have a subconscious liking for it. Probably he would. If he didn't have that liking, he wouldn't have the gift. That is something to watch out for, because you could get caught. Do you really want to waste an incarnation or 5 in just that? If not, then better leave that one alone. Desire for food can be finished once you've got your indigestion. got it over with. But desire for a whole different direction can be something else. Watch the more serious desires. Watch those things that are likely to involve you. And I've noticed this in human nature. I've noticed this in people. When they stumble on something like that, they become extremely affirmative. They, oh no, this is great. Oh, I never will forget God, but this is what God wants me to do. And you see that it takes years before they discover that it was a detour. It didn't take them where they really wanted to go. Watch yourself. There's nobody else to do it for you. Watch yourself on those things, because the important thing is that you train your mind to go always toward true happiness, which is bliss, not false happiness, which gives you a little glow of satisfaction, and then it's over. You have the glow of everybody liking what you've done, everybody applauding, everybody saying this is a great singer or a great actor and so on. Finally, it's all over, and they've even forgotten what your name was. Master used to say that money and fame are like prostitutes. They're loyal to no man. Be loyal to God. He's the one that you need to always follow, no matter what comes. Be like a bark going through waves, but always moving in the same and right direction. When we seek God, unfortunately in a sense, but ultimately you discover that it's very fortunately, He throws everything in the works at you. It isn't He who's doing it. It isn't He who gives you those tests. No. It's your own karma that's bringing them out, and if you're sincere, what you want to do is get rid of those things. So whatever you experience, and if your karma forces you to go down some line of action, always in your heart, be removed from it. Don't be touched by it. As Sri Yukteswar said, the mind should remain always resistant. You will see that bit by bit, you do come out. There's nothing that can hold you really, because your tastes are not permanent. They're not a part of you. I remember when I was a child in school in Switzerland, there was a kind of chocolate that I loved. And when I went back there in 1955, I was 29 years old, 28 years old, I guess, at the time. And I saw this. And I thought, oh boy, just for old time's sake, let me get one and enjoy it. You know, I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't swallow the first mouthful. It was just too sickly sweet. I sort of went discreetly to a sink and spat it out. You'll find your tastes change. The things that seem absolutely, you couldn't possibly give them up. They're just a part of you. They aren't. Nothing is a part of you. You are that germ of consciousness that is forever unchanging at the heart of everything. The more you can live in such a way as to try to find that core of consciousness in yourself, that center of your whole being, the more you will see that you watch everything, but nothing is a part of you. Doesn't mean you don't enjoy. It means that then your enjoyment is at the source of enjoyment rather than in the reflection. What you see outwardly is only a reflection of enjoyment. The joy that everybody feels is really inside, but because they're so outward in their energy flow, they identify it with money, bank accounts, exciting experiences, people, whatever, material things and experiences, circumstances of one kind or another. But in truth, all that joy comes from within yourself. Now, if you live at the source of that joy, you can enjoy everything. And the enjoyment doesn't wear off. Look at a little child. Children love to go to zoos. And they love to see the tigers and the lions and the monkeys and the everything. But in spite of all that enjoyment, watch them. After a while, the enjoyment becomes an affirmation. And finally, yeah, Mommy, I'm enjoying it. And they fall asleep in their mother's arms. And so it is. You tell yourself you're enjoying it, you love this, but finally you get tired. Everything palls in the end. If you were to have the most beautiful music played to you day in and day out, you'd finally say, turn it off for God's sake. Let me find a little peace. You won't find happiness anywhere except in your capacity to experience it. And that capacity doesn't demand anything objective to be experienced. It isn't this thing or that thing that makes you happy. It's you who make yourself happy in fulfilling a thought that you have generated yourself. You have this thought that a cottage by the sea will make you happy, so you feel happy. Another one, this used to be said of Haiti. I think Haiti may have changed a little bit in the recent decades, but this is many decades ago. Everybody used to think that Haiti was, if there was a paradise on earth, that was it. And the Haitians could think of nothing more wonderful than moving to New York. You don't find happiness either in New York or in Haiti or in the most idyllic spot in the world. It all begins with you. And if you have that joy, you know, there was a wonderful thing in Thomas Merton's 7-Story Mountain, in which he was in Harlem, and he met these two old women who he said were saints. There they were, living in the midst of squalor and misery and anger and bitterness and all the seething emotions of people when they're far from God. And they were saints because they were just living in themselves and sharing what they could with others. Where you are won't do it for you. What you are will do everything for you. And so this harvest that God is talking about, that Jesus talked about in this statement here, is the harvest that all of us carry within us. We all have that potential, and it's infinite. Anything you harvest in this world is not plenteous. It tires, it palls, it becomes boring after a while. But the harvest that you have available to you in God is literally infinite. You know, I had an interesting thought about infinity. It's not only infinite large, but infinitesimally small. Granted, we all know that. But it's neither large nor small. I bet you didn't think of that one. It's just, you can't think of it in terms of space. It just is. Anandamoyi Ma used to say it is, and it isn't, and neither is it, nor is it not. You can't figure him out. Don't try. There's only one way, and that is to become like him. I used to pray to Master, help me to love you as you love me. And he saw me one day, he said, how can the little cup hold the whole ocean? I realized what he was saying. The little cup of human feeling can't hold infinite love. It can only hold so much of it. It feels infinite because it's overflowing. But you have to become one with infinite. To harvest the harvest of God, consciousness, you have to go with him and let him expand your consciousness to infinity. You can't do it. You can't say, well, I'm that. It doesn't hurt to try, because visualization at least helps to sort of get rid of the barricades, the blocks to that consciousness. That's why Master used to say, meditate on the poem Samadhi. I don't know, has our recording of metaphysical meditations come out? Has it out yet?
Few weeks.
Huh?
In a few weeks.
Few weeks. Okay, well, when it comes out, get that recording and listen especially to that poem Samadhi. It's so inspiring to listen to. Granted, you don't have that consciousness now. I don't imagine you do. You might. But the thing is that by meditating on it even, it helps to stir deeper than conscious memories. You know, Master told us one time, he said to us, do you know how I wrote that poem? How that poem came to me? And we said, no. He said, on the New York subway. You'd never believe it. There he was on this subway and all the worldly and somewhat depressing underground activity. He said, I went from one end of the line to the other again and again. He said, nobody asked me for my ticket. Then he paused and smiled. In fact, he said, no one even saw me. But in that state, you have that state wherever you are. You don't have to be on a beautiful mountaintop with all the beautiful vision of nature before you. In a New York subway. But listen to those words. I have read quite a bit of poetic and mystical literature, but never have I read anywhere a description of that state. What it does is, for one thing, block this hypnosis, help you to block this hypnosis that you are a limited human being, and all the things that come with that, and to affirm in you that memory. It's really only a memory. Remember, the definition of that state in Patanjali is smriti. Smriti means memory. When you go deep in meditation, suddenly you remember. It's not as if you're sitting there and you're in samadhi and thinking, oh God, for a pencil. I got to take notes on this. No, you don't have to think, well, I got to remember this. You do remember it. What you had, even an experience that you had in this life many years ago, when you have it again, it's there as if it had never left you. Dr. Lewis had a funny vision in a way, not quite a vision, but experience of God. He was a little boy and he was disobeying his mother. And suddenly this voice at the head of the stairs there said, Miney, you mind your mother and do what she says. And so he did. Years later, Master came to that place, and at that point in the house, at that spot in the house, he said, you had an experience of God here, didn't you? Those experiences remain. That consciousness remains. What you were, even if it was billions of years ago, you will never lose. You can't lose it. It's a reality forever, and it's your reality forever. So what happens is that when you achieve that state, suddenly you understand. Of course you love me. Of course I love you. Of course bliss is the whole answer. Of course. But it isn't something you have to create. Unlike worldly education, in which we try to pile on more and more information, to achieve that state, what you want to do is shed yourself of misinformation. Shed yourself of the thought that I'm this and I'm that and I want this and I want that. So when we speak of getting rid of the ego, we don't mean getting rid of what most people think of as ego, which is arrogance. It's just as much egoistical to have an inferiority complex. It's just as much a manifestation of ego to think in terms of I can't do anything. That's just as much ego. Who are you to say you can or can't? He does it all. The more you can have that thought, not of arrogance, but of non-existence except as a part of that infinite, that is what's difficult. Not so hard to overcome ordinary arrogance. A few experiences in life and you usually get it knocked out of your head, at least temporarily. You become great at one thing and then suddenly somebody else comes and he's greater. Or fashions change and suddenly nobody wants what you do or whatever. That's not what it's about at all. It's that, you see, every single thing that you can know as a human being is tied to this one thought of I. I see that. I understand that. I relate to this. I'm talking to him or her. All of it begins from this little seed point I. And it's not bad. It only becomes bad. It becomes an impediment, but it's an essential to our growth. The animals don't have very much sense of ego, and as a result, they also don't have the incentive to grow. They can feel a little bit of pain and hunger and whatever it might be, but it doesn't affect them in the same way. Humanity has enough intelligence to have created a strong thought of I involvement in whatever he does. And what we need to do is, it's good in the beginning because we have that discomfort. The ego tells us, well, I want to do something about it. I'm suffering. I want to get out of my suffering. I feel dry in my heart. I want to find devotion. I want to find bliss. We have that motivation, and it's good. It lifts us above the animal level. It lifts us above the primitive savages. But it impedes us from finding God. Because what we need to do is get rid of that thought finally and discover that He is doing it through us. Now we need that thought first because we want devotion, we want bliss, we want God's love, we want all these things. We should want them. It's what helps us to advance. I asked Master once, well, why don't suicides find God? They don't want anything in this world. And he laughed. He said, yes, but you also have to want God. You have to want Him. And who wants Him? Well, you have to think that it's you first. It's only later that as you become more refined and you find Him, as Jesus said, He enters like a thief in the night. He comes in, as it were, through the back door of the house. Here you are at the front door looking for Him. He's coming in through the back door. You're meditating, and suddenly you find you're becoming that which you're meditating on. And you want that love, and you feel it. Oh, you are that love. And so, bit by bit, you feel and realize, but He has to help you to give you that understanding that He's meditating through you. That's not so easy. One helpful way is to visualize the Guru in your body and visualize that He's meditating through you. Because we're human beings, it's hard to think in non-human ways. Hard to think of an infinite meditating through you, but to think of the Guru meditating through you, that's not so difficult. Think of it that way. When you can feel His smile there, when you feel His effort there, feel it's you doing it, not I. The more you do that, the more you find there's a real power in everything you do. You feel that you were just sort of the little spark that sort of got the motor moving, but then that motor takes over and it's no longer you really doing it. You're just sort of pushing it along and letting it push you along, and you don't really know who is doing what to whom. It's all just sort of happening with something more than your own ability. Now you want to develop that. And the ego, of course, steps in and say, wait a minute, I want to be this, that, important, whatever. That's what you have to fight against. You do have to work hard at eliminating that thought of I in order to allow the greater I to come in. You can do that by saying He is the doer. That doesn't mean you don't do. That's the difficulty. It's the most subtle and difficult thing in the universe to figure out. But it's your job, my job, everybody's job. I remember when I was new lecturing at the Hollywood Church in SRF many years ago, Master had told us, feel that God is talking through you. So I thought, well, okay, I'm just going to let Him speak. In the middle of a lecture of a sermon on Sunday morning, church was full, I stopped speaking. And I waited. 2 minutes passed. Mind you, 2 minutes. If I were to stand here for 2 minutes, you'd think I'd frozen. And after 2 minutes, I was perfectly comfortable. But after 2 minutes, I thought, well, that isn't the way it works. I better. You don't act in a divine way by not acting. You don't act in a divine way by turning it all over to God. Ananda, boy, would I have loved it. I used to just wish. I used to say, Divine Mother, you want this place. For God's sake, give me the money to do it. Give me the people to do it. Give me the opportunities. No, instead. Well, we don't need to go into that one. God wants you, and He wants you to do it with all the strength at your command. You can't say at a certain point, well, God, you do it. I've done my bit. He doesn't want that from you. But you'll find that as you do it, bit by bit, power comes to you. You know, when I had when I first built the retreat, that was a big job for me. I never used to like to think about money. In college, I wouldn't even sit at the same, mind you how fanatical I was, a little bit foolish, but anyway, I wouldn't sit at the same table with business majors. Scout's honor. I just was an artist and a writer and a poet and a musician. I wanted to mix with that kind of people as if they were more spiritual than businessmen. I sure learned differently when I discovered that Master's chief disciple was a self-made millionaire. You can't limit it this way or that way or the other way. God is in everything. But I didn't like the thought of having to earn it, and Divine Mother just sort of rubbed my nose in the dirt on that one. I had to earn it all myself. I had to go from city to city, lecturing, giving classes, and I think that's how I got arthritis, just sitting in that car all those night after night after night, just going from city to city to give these classes. Fortunately, people enjoyed them, and so I got enough students to be able to build the buildings and so on. But then so many obstacles came up that made it look as if I wouldn't possibly succeed. Finally, with God's grace, I did. But I do have to admit a certain bit of wrong attitude in the whole thing. I slightly resented Divine Mother for making me have to do it. I said, why do you make me have to do it? I don't want this money. I just want to serve you. All right, go out and pay that bill. But at the end, you know, I found my real gain was not the money needed to pay for everything. It was the inner strength of doing what I had to do in order to do it. The strength that came to me was worth everything. And this is what you will find, that whatever you do, and usually you'll have to do the thing you don't want to do, but if you do it, and do it for God, not for yourself, you'll see that He gives you a blessing that helps you to overcome. Your real gains will be inward, not outward. Your real gains will be the inner joy that you find as a result of it. So remember that this harvest that you have to harvest of God consciousness, well, remember, harvest is not an easy thing either. You've got to get out there and hay and pick and weed and all those things. That's what you've got to do with yourself. But remember, don't do it for yourself. Do it with this motive. You yourself have to do it. But if you give what you're doing to God, if you do it with the motive that I want to serve God, I want to please God, and if He gives you a test, just say, God, it's your test. Don't be attached to it. Don't be involved. Don't say, God, why are you doing this to me? Just, whatever you give me, God, I accept. You'll see that if you have that attitude, you can just go even-mindedly through everything, and there is just an underlying joy that keeps increasing with that. That is the harvest. You've gotten rid of weeds, and bit by bit the real fruits and the real vegetables grow. The real experiences of joy come. This is what it's all about. Jesus said, pray to the Lord of the harvest, that He send more laborers into the field. That means may God give you that grace, because it doesn't come even by your effort. When I was new with Master, I was very intellectual. I'd read a great deal, studied a great deal, out-argued everybody I met, and I came to God first from absolutely being fed up with intellectuality. I remember the sweetness of childhood, and I thought, that's what I want. And I read Master's book, and it changed my life. But when I was with him, he kept saying, get more devotion, work on getting devotion. So I did. And I remember beginning to feel that, well, I've succeeded. I feel great devotion. When I heard a report coming back from Master with a group of disciples talking about me, and he said, look how I have changed Walter. And I realized that's what it was all about. I had put myself in tune with him, and he had done the work. Yes, it took all my work to put myself in tune with him, but you don't have to do those things that really are signs of grace. You don't even have to develop devotion. You have to try. You have to do your best. And as you do your best, you'll find that although you may be a pretty broken reed, somehow He's able to come into you and He will give you all that you need to become, yes, like Jesus Christ. Because Jesus only came to show us what we can be, not to show us how great He was and us poor slobs down here can't hope for anything. He came to show us our potential. That which I have done, you shall do. And He could have put it this way and probably did. That which I have achieved, you shall achieve. So be a laborer for God. And don't ever think, I'm doing this for God and isn't God proud of me? No. In the very doing, if you do it right, He's doing it through you. You're not doing it. And when I say not to have ego involvement, I don't mean not to involve yourself and not to do it, but I say give it to Him, offer Him the fruits of your labor, ask Him to labor through you, and you'll see that more and more there does come into your consciousness this feeling of beatitude that everything you're doing, He's doing with you and you with Him, and you don't even know who begins and who ends. Getting rid of the sense of I means to exalt that sense of I to infinity. You never get rid of the sense of I, but you will realize that the real I isn't this tiny little human being. It's the infinite, expressing itself through all these forms. It's a wonderful adventure, an adventure worth all the incarnations of suffering. You never have heard or read of a saint saying, what a disaster, what a disappointment, what a scam. They all say it was every bit was worth it. And when you think what they went through to make it worth it, you have to realize they went through a lot. Even that lot, it's worth it. Give yourself to Him. Who are you? You don't matter. He's the only thing that is. It's He who does it all. You have to have the right understanding only of how to help Him do it.